Craig Zahler has proven himself to be a pretty remarkable filmmaker despite only 2 films. His directorial debut, Bone Tomahawk, set the groundwork for what's to come, with compelling characters placed in a realistic setting that spirals into an increasingly grotesque nightmare. And would you expect anything less from an artist whose core inspiration is Dungeons and Dragons? Bone Tomahawk's title is so literal, it's easy to work out what BRAWL on Cell Block 99 is about, and after watching it, his next film, Dragged Across Concrete, already sounds kinda ballsy.
Don't think someone like you can say that word anyway polite.
But the premise of being extremely direct and efficient is at the core of Zahler's style, and I think he recognises something that's gradually becoming the crux of a lot of films. Instead of having profound lessons, revelations, or any sort of commentary, Zahler opts to simply present a world with conflicting points of view and leave it up to the viewer to take it any way they see fit. Neither film is treated thematically, they literally speak for themselves.
That necessary.
Pretend like you're talking to God.
He doesn't smell like nachos.
Both Bone and BRAWL have a recurring pattern of starting out quite naturalistic and evolving into something quite abstract and cartoonish, akin to the pulp exploitative B-movies of the 70s, hence the jarring practical effects.
Fatality.
But specifically, BRAWL subverts having any sort of moral compass. In fact, the reason Vince Vaughn's Bradley ends up in prison, besides being busted for drug smuggling, is because he decides, in a conflicted moment of humanity, to help the cops being shot at by the dim-witted henchmen forced to assist Bradley in the operation.
You ready for 9/11 Part 2?
He could have easily have gotten away with it, but by showing his morality, it actually works against him. Rather than getting the assumed 5 years for assisting the officers, he ends up getting 7. And he isn't entirely surprised by this, because what good he's ever tried to do in life is always counteracted simply by how just unfair he's accepted his life to be.
You can tell it out here. I don't work in an office. I don't need to squeeze into one to hear some bad news.
So that well-intended morality that we're used to, in effect, causes his own downfall. But before we get to the prison, let's take a step back for a moment. The prison only takes up about 5/8 of the runtime. I know it's sad that I worked that out. But when I said efficient earlier, what I meant was not a single moment prior to the prison conflict is wasted, especially given Bradley isn't one for small talk because it triggers his repressed anger.
It's a tough time for businesses right now.
Not really interested in the economy.
Everything that's said and done is an absolute service to the characters and story in a sort of methodical Tarantino way, but instead it actually progresses the plot. For one, the film starts in the midst of things and litters background information on each character through implied visuals and some modestly cryptic dialogue.
Promise I can put a great big smile on each of those nuts.
Well, thanks. I don't want anyone to see their braces.
It seems like such a primitive thing, but it lends itself to retaining complete control of your attention, as opposed to the self-indulgence of a lot of dialogue-heavy narratives. The film has its big Kahuna Burger moment that sets the tone for Bradley's character. He explains to his wife that every time he goes for coffee, the containers are faced the wrong way, and he always ends up picking up the milk or the skim milk and never the cream, the one that he wants. The law of averages dictate that he should eventually get the cream to restore balance to his constant failure, but in his own words,
I don't think things even out fair like that.
for as mundane as it is, it summarizes his life and the film in a nutshell. He's completely disillusioned by the American dream and the premise of living a good, honest life, because really, it hasn't brought him the happiness or comfort he desires, hence the return to a criminal life tempted by constant visual reminders following his job loss.
I'm tired of getting the goddamn skim milk and hoping that luck brings us the cream, because it won't, not ever.
Once he's in prison, the conflict comes in the form of a gradual realization that he can never truly escape his past, and that past is never explained, but it is implied through Roman, the henchman forced to work with Bradley. Bradley has a distinct hostility towards Roman and persistently attempts to suppress his irrational behaviour, and just through comparative appearances alone, it suggests he sees too much of his former self in Roman, which makes for poetic irony that a manifestation of his former self is the very thing that puts him back in prison.
He looks like he's using.
Roman's been clean for 2 years. I test my employees. He's extremely reliable and he knows what to do in adverse situations.
Sorry. Words from a stranger don't trump instinct.
Bradley.
Being in prison shatters all his efforts to domesticate and normalize his life because of how very dehumanizing the entire experience is.
Best to remain civilized, Mr. Thomas. Even in a prison.
The main conflict, to kill a mysterious inmate in Block 99 to save his pregnant wife from a forced abortion from the man that Bradley indirectly got sent to prison, I know, messed up, right, would never work in Bradley's favour any way you look at it. To save his wife and unborn child, he has no choice but to become the very monster he wanted to distance himself from and further incarcerate himself to a life and death sentence in the very place he ultimately wanted to escape from. Once we get to Red Leaf, we enter a completely new world accentuated by the film's aesthetic. It's a place so completely oppressed and deprived, it basically becomes their incarnation of hell that exists outside the laws and rules of reality, hence the transition to more elaborate forms of violence that carry the rest of the movie. The action is choreographed by Wing Chun martial arts experts, which mixes close-range defensive and offensive combat that is both direct and efficient, again playing literally in the Zahler style and Bradley's characterization.
Try and open that gate or gas me, I'll murder them both.
He'll do it. Efficiently.
Violence feels heavy and brutal because of how undisturbed the filmmaking is. Zahler emphasizes performance over style, allowing for the physicality of the action to drive the scene so that nothing looks or feels manufactured. There is an authenticity to fights where the real actors do occasionally make contact, and it lends itself to how important Bradley's appearance is to the film.
That muscle just for show?
Helps me lift stuff.
This is a movie that plays for and against typecast. Despite being traditionally known as a boisterous comedic actor, Zahler perceived Vince Vaughn as too visually intimidating to be a comedy star, and given Vaughn's commercial and critical failures prior to the film, Vaughn himself started to realize he did have a suitable niche in more commanding roles, which developed from True Detective and Hacksaw Ridge respectively.
I believe any man who takes such pride in his natural naked state will surely enjoy the brisk of the outdoors. Now move your private parts!
Essentially, this really is his resurgence as an actor. He carries this movie emotionally and physically. Everyone perceives him as a walking lump of unstoppable muscle, but he is a deeply sensitive and caring character, constantly trying to avoid letting anger consume him. When he's beating the hell out of a car, Vaughn himself is literally beating the hell out of a real car. And because it's real, you feel just how impactful his aggression really is to those around him.
Give me some time before you get closer.
In my best of 2017, I ranked BRAWL on Cell Block 99 as my favourite, and I think it's above and beyond just the simplicity and efficiency of the storytelling. It's easy to underestimate how significant Vince Vaughn really is to it all. It's not just what he puts himself through physically and emotionally, it's how his physicality enlightens his character. He's a man fueled by practicality. He doesn't wait for luck or hope because he knows they're just fabrications, and he never complains about how every action he commits in prison furthers the grave he's digging for himself. Bradley understands he's dealt a bad hand in life and nothing will ever change that. But for as tragic as his decline is, when you think about it, he's selflessly sacrificing himself by using all of his repressed anger for the sake of true, genuine love.
I love you too.
And with that, why not share your own thoughts in the comments below or directly with me on Twitter? And if you enjoy the show and want to get early access, you can also support me on Patreon. And until next time, stay safe and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.